Hello friends, welcome to Joy of Life. So before we proceed with this episode, what I would like to tell you is that if you have not seen the system design introduction video, wherein we have discussed about the architecture of this mini project that we are building, I would highly recommend you to check the same. I will leave a link to the description as well so that you can click, check the same and then get back onto the video. So in the previous video, we have introduced Redis and we have effectively used the Redis cache in order to get the data from there. And we are going to the database only if we don't find in the cache, right? And the other change that we have talked about is moving to Cassandra from MySQL. So what we are going to do today is we are going to remove MySQL from the application and we are going to use Cassandra instead. So in this video, we will cover how to set up Cassandra in Docker, how to create the key space, the table, how to establish the connection from your Spring Boot application, and how to store and read data as well. So let's begin. So we are here at the Docker Hub and here is the official image of Cassandra. So it's the official image and we are going to use this image in order to create our container. So to start with, what we are going to do is we are going to pull in the Docker image. So let's see what are the images we have. So currently these are the images with us. We have our created two services, the HTML worker and the feeder service. Apart from that, we have Redis, Kafka, Zookeeper, MySQL, and it's time to use Cassandra. So what we are going to do is we are going to get the latest version of it. So we are going to do a Docker pull Cassandra. And once again, everything is documented over here in this page. So you get all the commands and it's pretty well documented. You will get all the commands to start a container, create a cluster, and things like that. So let's do it, and I will touch upon all the areas that we'll be using. So I will not go very deep inside Cassandra. What I'll do is I'll touch on all the places that we'll be using. So okay, so over to the image. So let's pull the image. So as usual, the latest image will be pulled and it will take a couple of minutes based on your connectivity speed. So you can see that it's being downloaded at the moment. And we are almost there, and yeah, it's completed. So you can see that the pull has been completed and it's extracting all the packages. So I think, yeah, so we are done over here. So you can see that downloaded newer image of Cassandra latest. So if you do a Docker images now, you should be able to see the Cassandra latest over here. It's been created 4 weeks ago, and let's go ahead and use it. So first we are going to create a container and then we are going to see what we can do, and we'll play around a little as we always do. We are going to explore the SQL shell and all those things down the line. So let's get the container up first. So we are going to use the same command that we always do. So Docker we are going to run and we need to provide it with a name, and let's stick to the same name as Cassandra, and we will map a port. So if you want to connect to Cassandra, it by default runs on 9042. So we'll map the same port. So we'll map 9042 to the containers 9042. And we are going to run it in a detached mode, and the name of the image is also Cassandra. So you can see that the container has been created over here, and what we'll do quickly is we'll get into this and we'll see how to connect to it. So once again, we are going to use the same way as we connect to the other instances of MySQL and all. So Docker exec in the interactive mode, and then you need to give the name of the container that you want to connect to, and you need to give the command. So in our case, just like MySQL, we know that we want to connect to SQL SH. So you can directly specify that. So once you do that, what happens is you can see that you are in the SQL SH. SQL is nothing but it's more like a SQL, but not exactly like a SQL. It's a Cassandra query language. So few of the terminologies differ from your MySQL or standard SQL databases. So here we create key spaces. So keyspace is more like a namespace in Cassandra, wherein you define how your data is replicated between the nodes and things like that. We are going to see how to create one, how to use one, and things like that. So let's see what are the key spaces that we have. So we can do a describe key spaces, and it will list down all the key spaces that's present over here. As we see, we have some of the system defined key spaces. So we are going to go ahead and create a key space, and creating a key space is very easy. What you do is you just give the command create key space followed by name. So we'll use URL feeder over here because we are doing it for the URL feeder service. So that's how you create it, and along with that, what you need to provide is with the replication parameters over here. So in Cassandra, what we do is we set up the replication so that your data is being replicated to the other node, and it should not become the single point of failure, right? So first thing we need to provide is a class. So the class is nothing but a strategy, how it should work, and we are going to use a simple strategy. So there are basically multiple types of strategy. One is a network topology strategy. The other is a simple strategy, right? So network topology is like you can set the replication factor for each of your data center independently and things like that, right? And you also have a old network topology strategy, which is one from the legacy system. So basically we have two strategy. One is a simple strategy, wherein we also provide the replication factor. So you need to provide a replication factor over here. So basically we are having just a single node. So there is not going to be any replication factor. It's going to be one for us. But in real-time deployments and all, we'll have more replication factors so that the data is replicated to more number of nodes and it does not become a single point of failure for you, right? So once you do it, what will happen is it will go ahead and create your key space. So you can just do a describe, and you can see that your key space is over here. So now you can say that I want to use URL feeder, this key space, and you can see that the prompt has changed to SQL sh followed by the key space name. And over here you can say that show me what are the tables. We don't have any tables for the moment, but it's more like your MySQL, where you say that show databases or show tables. It lists down all the tables. So what we are going to do quickly is we are going to go ahead and create the table that we want. So over to the application over here, if you remember that we are mapping our URL class that we have over here, right? So in our URL class, what we have is an ID, we have a URL, we have a times process, content type, last processed, and created these 5 fields. So we are going to use all these 5 fields in our table. So we'll go ahead and create a table which will have all these 5 fields. So this time what we'll do is we'll create a composite primary key which will take both of these. Okay, so let's create the table over here. So what we can say is that it's a very same that we'll create a table called URL, and we need to provide in the things that we need. So ID is going to be a text because we are using UUID, and then we have the URL which is also a text, and then we have times underscore processed, which is a int. It's going to take the count over here, and we have the content type, which is again a text over here, and then we have last processed, that's a timestamp that we have. So we are going to use timestamp over here, and we have the created date, which is also timestamp, right? And at the end, what we are going to say is that we are going to define a primary key over here, and which will take both ID and URL. So we are going to close this press, and I think it should be fine. Okay, so now if I do a describe tables, we can see that we have a table called URL. And how do you select? It's pretty simple, the same way we used to do. So here is the table, and we don't have any records at the moment in our table, right? So this is how the table looks. So we have completed the creation of key space. We have done the creation of the table and things like that. We are done. So over to the application, wherein we'll change our application. We'll get rid of MySQL, and we are going to use Cassandra. So first, let me remove all the things that we don't need and add and configure Cassandra. So let's start from our POM file over here. So we don't need Spring Boot Data JPA, this thing, and we don't need the MySQL dependency because we are not using MySQL dependency anymore. So let's get it commented over here. So we are good over here. And what we are going to do is we are going to go to our URL class, and if you remember, these are all from our MySQL dependencies, right? So we are going to remove all of them. So yeah, pretty much I have cleaned up all. Let's remove the imports. So imports are also taken care. So the next thing is that we will change our repository. So repository need to be changed. So what we'll do for the moment is we'll go ahead and comment it. We don't need it over here. So let's remove the import. We'll soon create everything. So for now, I'm just getting rid of the things that we don't need. Okay, so enable JPA repositories is something that we don't need. So what we are additionally going to do over here with enable auto configuration is we are going to just mention over here that we don't want these classes to be auto configured. Don't configure the data source auto configuration, data source transaction manager, and -8 JPA. So these are the one that was used by MySQL earlier. So that is the only change that we are going to do over here, and the rest all looks good over here. And now what we did basically is we got rid of all the MySQL related things over here. So MySQL related things are clean. If you want to get rid of your properties over here, you can do so, but anyways they are not going to get used anymore. So let's go ahead and comment them as well. So our application is now free from MySQL. And now what we are going to do is we are going to add the dependency for our Cassandra over here. So you can go ahead and search on the repository, or I can just add it. It comes with Spring itself. So Spring Boot Starter Data Cassandra, and I am sticking to the same version as my only version that I have. So you can just Google it with Spring Boot Starter Data Cassandra, and you will find the link, or anyways the code is also in the repository, so it won't be a problem. Dependency, so we are going to do a re-import so that every dependency is resolved, and once we are done with that, we'll go ahead and make the required changes for our application over here. So the first thing that I need to tell my Spring Boot application is to enable Cassandra over here. So I'll say that enable Cassandra repository. So this is one of the important thing that you need to mention over here, so that your application knows that you have Cassandra over here. So okay, let me remove the unused import. Okay, so we are good. The other thing that we need to change is on our URL entity over here. So now this is no more storing in MySQL, and now we need to put the right annotation so that it goes ahead and stores everything in Cassandra, or it recognizes things, right? So the first thing that we need is previously we have also used an annotation of table, but this time also we are going to use the same annotation, but check it out that it's not from JPA, but it is from data Cassandra core mapping, right? It looks the same, but it behaves a little different, and we are not going to give the name. We're just going to specify over here that it's a URL. Okay, and the next thing is that I have to mention over here that these are my primary key columns. So we are not creating a class, but it's always recommended that you go ahead and create a class for your primary key. But our needs are pretty simple, and I wanted to keep it very basic so that you get the flavor and understanding. The name is the first thing that you need to give for a primary key column, and the next thing that you need is an ordinal. So ordinal is nothing but it's the order of this column relative to your primary key column. So this is my first primary key. So I am going to mention it as 0 over here. And then you need to provide the type as well. For type, what we'll do is we'll go for primary key partitioned. So we are not using a clustered environment. So we are just going by the partitioned environment over here. So we are going to mention that, mention the same over here. And similarly for the key, for the other key over here, what will happen is it's 1. So it's the next primary key, right, we have, and it will be mapping to our URL field over here. For the other fields over here, what we'll do is we'll just mark them with columns, but do check it out. It's all from the Cassandra core mapping. Okay, and we are just going to give the name that we'll copy. We can copy it from here. We just need to give the name of those fields over here. So with that, our class is ready. I have annotated everything in the class. We are good over here. So I am not removing the comments. For those who are following my earlier videos might get some help from it. But what I'll do is I'll create a separate branch for Cassandra altogether, and we are going to use this branch. So there will be no change in the MySQL branch if you are referring to it. Okay. So we are good. We have added all the annotation for this class, and we have completed whatever is required for this class. And now it's time for our repository over here. So it's done for our repository. So what we are going to do is we are going to definitely go ahead and create the same repository that we had, but we are going to extend something else. So we are going to extend the Cassandra repository, and what we are dealing with is a URL and which has a string which is the primary key, right? So put the package. Okay, so our class is ready, so we can deal with it. So let's put a repository over here. So just marking this interface with a stereotype annotation over here. So this is from Spring Framework itself. And if you remember that we needed this method, right? So this method is something that we need. So let's get this method over here. And how it works is you have a field inside your URL called URL. So it follows the camel case notation. So what we need to do is we have to change this URL to URL. So if you keep it capital, it's not going to work. And what you need to do also mention over here is to allow the filtering. So this will enable the server-side filtering on your Cassandra queries. So we are going to annotate this class with this. So one thing to keep in mind that you have to use find by followed by the name of the field, and make sure that you follow the right casing over here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And also what happens is that it returns optional. What might happen that you might not get any result, so we'll go ahead and use the optional over here. It won't return a null. It follows the good Java 8 practices, you can say. So it will return me optional, and we have to evaluate the optional and check. So with that, our repository is ready, and now we are going to go ahead and make the changes to the service class. Okay, so in the service class, what we have been doing so far is our repository will remain the same because we have made modification to that repository. So find by URL is going to get changed over here. So it will be the lowercase, and what we get over here is optional. So let's go ahead and change this to optional, and I will just go ahead and put it as existing URL OPT, and we don't need null text. That's the best part of it over here. So we can just go ahead and simply say that if it is not empty, then we are going to go ahead and deal with the existing URL. So what we'll do is we'll create a existing URL string over here, and we can do a the name was existing URL opt dot get. So we are certain that we have the value. It is not empty, and we are going to go ahead and grab the value and going to do the work based on that. Okay, so this will be a URL object. So URL of existing URL dot get, and rest of the things remains the same. So this is the only place where we are querying the DB and to get the values, and rest all save and all will function as it is. There is no need for any change. The same method that we see is being exposed by the repository called Cassandra repository. So we have find all, find by ID, and insert and save all, save, and all those things are already there. So save you will not see over here. It's part of your CRUD repository. So you'll have the save method over here. So rest all remains the same. So there is not much of modification except for the custom method that you are adding. So that's what we have changed, and the rest all remains the same, and there is no change. Just to revisit, just to check if anything else changes. So most of the places there are no changes required. So you can see with the bare minimum changes, we were able to get things done. So now we have made all the code changes. What will basically happen is, you know, that Spring goes ahead and picks up the property from our application.properties file. So we need to set up the properties over here. So that will be used by Cassandra in order to configure it, right? So again, so we have to provide for Spring data Cassandra, and then we need to provide all those parameters. So the first thing that we need is a keyspace name. So it will take only the important ones. So the rest all we can use the default configuration. So we can go ahead and create a custom class also. But this tutorial over here, since we are just introducing Cassandra over here, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So down the line, we'll go ahead, create our own SQL session and things like that, but for this tutorial I'm just going to keep it very simple. So let's go ahead and copy this. Let's not type in every time. So the next thing is the contact points, and do remember that you can end up having more than one addresses, but we are having a single node, so it will be just one for us. So once again, it's the local host, and then you need to provide the port on which it is listening. So it's 9042. And the last thing that we need is a local data center. So we'll be using a local data center because we don't have a data center, right? So data center equals to data center 1. So with that, what happens is our configuration stands complete, and all the modification that we wanted is done. So these are the 4 properties that you'll be needing to get connected. So what we are going to do is we are going to get Postman and start the application, send a couple of requests. Let's go ahead and start the application. We are going to run it from local. The Cassandra is running on the Docker. So you know how to connect. All those things are good to us. So we are just going to check this part. So we are going to go ahead and run this application, and we are also going to bring up the terminal over here so we can do a select query and see that the data is coming as expected or not, right? So the application is coming up over here, and everything looks good. No problem as of now. No, there is problem. Okay, so this problem is basically happening for Redis. So we don't have Redis running. So what we'll do is quickly go ahead and start Redis. So let me bring up another command prompt window, which using which what we'll do is we'll start Redis over here. So we are just not going to do anything. We'll just say docker start Redis, and it should have the Redis instance up and running for us. So we'll just quickly verify and close this. So we'll do a docker ps. We have both Cassandra and Redis running, so we are good. We are just going to go ahead and restart the application, and with that everything should work as expected, hopefully. Okay, so we are good. We don't see any exception this time. Okay, so we are going to go to the Postman and we are going to send a request over here. So let's try with facebook.com. So we have a request with facebook.com, and let's bring up the terminal side by side. So we'll send this request, and with that what I see is I got a 200, so it went through. Let's put google.com, and let's put a bunch of URL and try it out. So you can see on the application console also there is no error. Everything looks to be running as expected. So let's go ahead and check in the Cassandra console what we are getting. Well, you can see that you have both the URL google.com, facebook.com inserted. So it is reading, it is storing in the cache, it's doing everything that's required. So you can understand that if I do hit with a google.com, it's going to have a cache miss for the first time, and it will populate based on the response from the Cassandra, right? So you can see there is a cache miss. So it went ahead and made the query to Cassandra, and it got the record and it persisted it inside our cache as well. So the next time, again, as we have seen earlier, it will be served from the cache. So that means data is coming. We are able to get hold of the data. There are no exception. And with that, I hope you got some idea about how do we configure Cassandra on Docker. How do we establish a basic connection over here using our application. We did a query. We got the result that we are looking for. And we have successfully migrated from MySQL to Cassandra. Though we did not had any data to be migrated, but this was just a technology lift and shift that we just lifted MySQL out of our application and shifted Cassandra inside our application, and I hope you got the basic concept of how to work with Cassandra, right? So with that, we'll end the video over here. Do let me know if you have any questions or suggestions. Down the line, what we are going to do is we have a lot in the agenda. I could not make video for a week. I was not keeping well. So we'll get back to it now. It's time to play around with Nginx, Kubernetes, and many other things, right? So we have a lot in plan, and our application is not even 10% complete, right? So with that, please do share with your friends, let the channel grow. Please subscribe, please stay subscribed and recommend this to your friend as well. And see you soon, guys. Bye bye and take care.